I made this video using this computer, this iPad, and the internet. But not all students have those resources. There's a hospital nearby that serves thousands of people living in my city, but not everyone has proper access to healthcare. My university gives me academic and career opportunities for my future, but not everyone has those opportunities, especially those living in rural America. My name is Ahel Abdul Nazir, and today we're going to be talking about America's rural crisis. So what exactly is the rural crisis? It's basically when communities living in rural regions of the United States are experiencing challenging conditions regarding infrastructure, workforce, technological development, and other aspects. Today we'll be covering three major industries that are impacted by the rural crisis: education, healthcare, and the rural economy. We'll go over a general explanation of how these industries are impacted, what solutions can be implemented to fix them, and an example of what's going on in the real world. Let's start off with education. So, at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, schools all across the country were struggling to shift to services like Zoom and create new online school curriculums. They needed resources, but eventually they got them and developed new systems to help their students learn. But the thing is, rural school districts have been struggling to get those resources for years, both before the pandemic as well as after. Now, there are a lot of disparities that rural schools face compared to their urban counterparts. For starters, today, 19% of adults living in non-metro or rural areas have started and finished a bachelor's degree. That's compared to the 33% of adults living in metro and more urbanized areas. This difference also contributes to both racial and ethnic gaps in education. The majority of communities living in rural America are African American or Latino. And because they're provided limited educational opportunities, they're less likely to pursue higher education and receive less career opportunities as a result. But why is that? Well, it's primarily because of the lack of funding and financial support that goes to rural school districts. According to a 2021 Journal Report study on rural education, only 17% of state education funding goes to these rural school districts. Today, students need tools like this iPad to learn and adjust to new online curriculums. But how can schools even get computers or iPads to their kids if they lack the funding to solve even bigger problems, like access to the internet, or have electricity properly running at their schools? So to solve these problems, policymakers need to push their state governments to direct more money to rural school districts to fill in the gaps that they're missing in terms of educational resources. Now, there are also nonprofit organizations like the National Rural Education Association that are helping to support these policies. Furthermore, there are bills being passed in Congress, like the Secure Rural Schools Reauthorization Act of 2023, that's bringing more funding to public schools in rural areas. And the funding really is helping these school districts.
Adams is doing whatever he can to make sure that the 20,000 students in his schools, 98% Hispanic and about 10% undocumented, develop the skills they need to graduate.
So we realized that we had to provide this for our students in order for them to compete in the 21st century.
In 2016, the Coachella Valley Unified School District noticed the lack of educational growth in their district and used their state funding to provide internet access to the communities they were serving and tools to help their kids learn outside the classroom.
So when we found out there was spots in areas where students were not connected, we said, well, how can we get them connected? And so one of the ways is, well, look, we got 100 buses. Let's put Wi-Fi routers on those buses and let's park them where the need is.
If other rural school districts get the financial support they need to create solutions and problems like this, they can increase the academic performance of their students, provide them more career opportunities, and ultimately enhance the growth and development of their surrounding rural communities as well. Like education, healthcare is just as important for communities to thrive. But unfortunately, rural communities have been facing a lack of access to adequate healthcare. The biggest reason to this is the lack of medical services and workforce in rural regions, as well as the numerous hospital shutdowns happening in rural America. This is Sumner Community Hospital, located in Wellington, Kansas. It shut down in March of 2020 due to a lack of patients coming in, since healthcare was so expensive, as well as the limited funding to financially support the hospital. This hospital, along with many other medical facilities in rural America, are being shut down, and the few left are just too far away for rural communities to access. From 2013 to 2020, more than 100 rural hospitals shut down because they didn't receive the funding necessary to serve these vast regions. As a result, rural residents have to travel at least 20 to 40 miles just to reach their nearest healthcare provider. You see, that's the biggest problem. Rural communities just don't have close, adequate access to healthcare. So, what are our solutions? Well, there are many actually, but all of them rely on the basis of revamping the healthcare infrastructure of rural America. For starters, we can shift towards alternate healthcare solutions, like telehealthcare. Telehealthcare services are basically when the doctor and the patient communicate with each other through an online service, and it saves a lot of time and money for both the hospital and their patients. Another viable solution is to develop more mobile healthcare clinics, which roam around rural America to serve rural and tribal communities, as well as take care of the homeless population in rural America as well, which, according to a report by Tulane University, is 38% of the patients that visit these mobile healthcare clinics. Lastly, a more long-term solution is for urban healthcare providers to merge with healthcare providers in rural areas. This will help rural hospitals gain more funding, as well as more advanced resources to improve their healthcare services and better serve the rural population. When I say economy, the first thing I think of is markets and stocks, but it means so much more than that. It's about providing jobs, improving infrastructure and growth, reducing poverty, and so much more. And because of this, rural America plays a big role in the overall US economy. The majority of the rural economy is controlled by agricultural, manufacturing, and mining jobs. However, the firms that control these industries are monopolies and basically use all their power to generate the most money for themselves. As a result, all of these jobs are being outsourced to more higher paying regions like urban areas, and employment levels are decreasing in rural areas. And ultimately, all the revenue being generated are just going back to the firms and their shareholders, not the rural communities that are supporting these industries. This damage was especially apparent after the COVID-19 pandemic, where only 43% of rural communities were able to recover their employment numbers afterwards. So, how do we increase job opportunities and help these communities prosper in rural America? Well, first, policymakers need to reevaluate the economic state of rural America and realize that they need to prioritize the agricultural and manufacturing job market to rural residents. They're the majority workers supporting these industries after all, and without them, frankly, the US economy will plummet. State governments need to set limits on monopolizing firms and their interactions with the job market, so rural citizens can get the jobs they need and help support their community and develop small economies to grow their infrastructure. Secondly, state governments need to develop new programs and initiatives to help these communities become financially stable again. This includes housing crisis initiatives, educational opportunities, and a bunch of other programs that can help these people get the jobs they need to support their families, their communities, and then ultimately, their country. Now, the majority of my audience is probably from urban and suburban areas that have little impact on rural policy. But the truth is, it's important for people to understand the rural crisis and the disparities that these communities are facing. Because our country lives on the basis of equality, including everyone having the chance to pursue the opportunities they want. From the East Coast to the West Coast to everything in between. We need to provide resources to people that need it the most. Because the truth is, every region, state, county, city or town, and community contributes to the well-being of the United States. So, if we help each other grow and succeed by achieving this equality, then we can also help our country grow and succeed as one. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something about America's rural crisis.